Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking into a really chilling true crime story. It's one that unfolded over, well, more than a decade, really, full of missteps, incredible perseverance, and just a long, painful journey towards justice. We're talking about the tragic and complex case of Hannah Hill. She was just 18 years old, her life cut short way too soon, and the search for answers. It was just filled with twists and turns. It's a story that, it really shook a community to its core. So let's talk about Hannah. She was born back in May 1981 in Akron, Ohio. An only child, lived with her parents, and like I said, just 18, recently graduated high school. She was, well, by all accounts, really excited about starting her life. She had a part-time secretary job lined up for the summer. She'd even bought her own car. Big plans for college after the summer break. Apparently really popular too, lots of friends. Got crowned winter queen at a school dance. The kind of person friends would just hang out with, watch movies, talk. But they went out on weekends too. Hannah also had a boyfriend at the time, Brad Urban. He was 19. They'd actually lived together for a bit. But Hannah had moved back home with her parents before this happened. Friends mention that she and Brad argued quite a lot.
Yeah, then some friends even said he could be physically abusive sometimes. That was apparently the main reason she moved back home.
Right. But despite all that, they were still technically together, still in a relationship. Okay, so let's set the scene. It's Wednesday, May 19th, 1999. Hannah gets home from work, usual afternoon routine. Around 9 p.m., she changes into her pajamas. She even called her friend Jennifer, said she was just planning to stay in that night. But then something changed. She changed out of her pajamas, told her mother, Kimberly, that she was going out, and her mom later said Hannah seemed, well, disturbed or bothered about something. She left the house around 10 p.m., just saying, "I'll see you later." The next morning, Thursday, her parents wake up and Hannah isn't home. At first they thought, okay, maybe she stayed at a friend's place, But then Hannah's boss calls. She hadn't turned up for her secretarial job, and that's when the worry really set in. The family knew something was wrong. Hannah just wasn't the type to skip work like that. So that evening, May 20th, Hannah's mom filed a missing persons report with the Akron police. She gave them a description of Hannah's car too, a 1996 Geo Prism.
And this is where things start to go wrong with the official response. The police took, well, absolutely no immediate action. Years later, their explanation was basically that 18-year-olds go missing all the time and turn back up.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a really stark contrast to the family and friends who knew Hannah, who knew this was completely out of character. That lack of urgency, unfortunately, it proved to be critical later on.
I can only imagine how frustrating that must have been for her family. So with basically very little help from the police, they started their own search, going around, talking to all her friends. Hannah's best friend, Jennifer, she was really leading the charge. She talked to Brad Urban, the boyfriend. He denied seeing Hannah, said he had no idea where she was. Jennifer also spoke to other friends, including a 20-year-old named Denny Ross. He also said he hadn't seen her. So 2 days go by, agonizing days, I'm sure. Still no sign of Hannah, no real leads. Then the police get a call about an abandoned Geo Prism, parked on the side of a road a few miles from Hannah's house, been there a couple of days.
But here's the thing. Remember, that lack of urgency. Hannah's missing persons report hadn't actually been entered into the police system yet.
You're kidding.
No. So the officer who took the call about the car, he had no way of knowing it belonged to a missing person. He just sent someone out to put a parking ticket on it.
Unbelievable. Just a parking ticket. Okay, so the next day, Brad Urban, the boyfriend, he goes down to the police station himself, tries to push them to speed up the search. And while he's there, the police notice he's covered in scratches all over him. When they ask him about it, he claims he and Hannah had an argument a few days before she disappeared, and she scratched him then, said it wasn't serious.
Police were definitely suspicious. I mean, scratches on the boyfriend of a missing girl, that's a red flag. But they didn't have any concrete evidence linking him to her disappearance at that point, so they couldn't arrest him.
So the police finally release some information to the media about Hannah being missing, hoping for a tip. And people start calling in again about that abandoned Geo Prism. Several people.
And unbelievably, at least 2 of those callers were basically told to, quote, call back tomorrow if it was still there.
Even though they thought it was Hannah's car.
Even though they specifically mentioned they thought it was the missing girl's car.
Yeah. Finally, on Wednesday, May 26th, a full week after Hannah vanished, officers are actually dispatched to check out the car. It's about 7:30 in the morning. They arrive, look at the car. Seems normal enough from the outside. But then they open the trunk, and that's where they found her. Hannah Hill's body was inside. Her mother later recalled that moment. She said, who else's body is going to be in the trunk of his car? I just broke down and I was hysterical. I didn't believe it. Just heartbreaking.
And the condition of her body told a terrible story. She was found naked from the waist down, her top clothes pulled up around her neck. Police reports said she was posed in a, quote, very sexually suggestive way, which strongly indicated a sexual assault.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And she was covered in bruises, cuts, scratches all over her body, her face. It pointed to a real struggle. The autopsy confirmed she died from strangulation. They also found some unidentified white substance on her lip and a bite mark on her arm. There was also evidence suggesting she'd had sex shortly before her death. And while you can't always be 100% certain, the context strongly pointed towards it not being consensual.
And the community must have been outraged about the delays.
Absolutely. Especially knowing the car had been reported multiple times. People were wondering, if they'd acted sooner. Could she have been saved? We don't know if she was alive when she was put in the trunk. That initial inaction just casts such a dark shadow.
So with Hannah's body found, it becomes a full-blown murder investigation. And that initial focus, it snaps right back to Brad Urban, the boyfriend. I mean, the history of abuse, the scratches, he was the obvious first suspect. Police interviewed him again on the day her body was discovered. But then, for reasons they never really made public, they dropped him as a suspect.
Yeah, it's a bit murky. Reports say he passed a lie detector test. But, as you probably know, those tests aren't exactly foolproof, especially in court.
Right. Can you maybe quickly explain why they're viewed so skeptically?
Sure. Polygraphs, or lie detector tests, they measure things like heart rate, blood pressure, sweating. The idea is that lying causes stress, which changes these physiological responses. But the problem is, lots of things cause stress. Anxiety, fear, even just being hooked up to a machine and interrogated can trigger those responses.
Okay, so it's not directly measuring lies.
Exactly. It's measuring physical reactions that might be associated with lying, but might also be caused by something else entirely. That's why most courts don't allow polygraph results as evidence. They're just considered too unreliable scientifically.
Gotcha, that makes sense. So after ruling out Brad, police start looking elsewhere. They check Hannah's phone records, see who she called that night she disappeared. And one name pops up. Denny Ross. 20 years old. Now, according to Hannah's best friend, Jennifer, Hannah and Denny weren't really close friends. Jennifer knew Hannah sometimes went to parties at his place, apparently. It was known as the party house because no parents lived there.
And Denny himself had a bit of a reputation. Known as a player, kind of untrustworthy. Hannah had even warned friends about him, apparently calling him aggressive and saying something like, if he wants something, he'll try and go after it until he gets it.
That's concerning. And didn't he have recent legal trouble, too? Yes, he did. Just 2 months before Hannah went missing, he'd been caught trying to sell about $500 worth of cocaine. And actually, just 2 days before she disappeared, he pleaded guilty to cocaine trafficking and got 2 years probation. So, back to May 26th, the day Hannah's body is found, the day Brad Urban is kind of cleared, police go to Denny Ross's apartment. Not necessarily as the prime suspect yet, but just to talk to him, since he was one of the last people Hannah called. When they get there, they notice his arm is broken, in a cast. He tells them he broke it in a fight a couple of weeks back. But then, during the questioning, Denny says something huge. He admits Hannah did come over to his house that night, around 11 p.m.
And this is massive, because he hadn't told anyone this before. Not his friends, not the police when they were looking for her as a missing person, nothing. Yeah, that immediately throws up huge red flags. Hannah's been missing a week, everyone's frantic, and he saw her that night but said nothing.
Wait, why wouldn't you come forward?
Exactly. Why wouldn't you tell the police? Try to help. That delay, that silence, it's incredibly suspicious. It screams guilt, or at least that he has something serious to hide.
Absolutely. So because of that massive suspicion, police immediately get a search warrant for Denny's apartment. Early hours of May 27th, just hours after finding Hannah. About 15 officers search his second-floor apartment. Inside, they find what look like blood spots on the walls, throughout the apartment, really, on the window shades, even on his bed sheets. But the really damning find was outside. An officer spots a garbage bag under a bush right below one of Denny's windows, sees a shoe sticking out. They pull the bag out, look inside, and it's horrifying. Women's pants covered in blood and feces, women's underwear, shoes.
They're quickly identified as Hannah Hill's belongings.
So within 24 hours of finding Hannah's body, Denny Ross is arrested on suspicion of aggravated murder, but he insists he's innocent right from the start. His family, including his dad, Alan Ross, they hired top defense lawyers, and those lawyers immediately start picking apart the evidence.
The prosecution felt they had a strong case. They had several key pieces. First, obviously, that bag of Hannah's bloody clothes found right there on Denny's property. Second, semen found in Hannah's underwear. DNA testing matched it to Denny Ross.
Okay.
Third, That weird white residue found on Hannah's lip, it seemed to match the material from Denny's arm cast, and fourth, the bite mark on Hannah's arm. Investigators believe it was a perfect match to Denny Ross's teeth. Plus, you have his repeated lies about not seeing her that night, strong circumstantial evidence suggesting deception. But the defense team, they came back hard. They argued the police basically rushed to charge Denny. Maybe, they suggested, because the police felt pressure after their own initial mistakes in finding Hannah's body, the week-long delay.
Trying to close the case quickly.
Possibly. The defense pointed out that while there was blood in Denny's apartment, none of it was actually matched to Hannah. It was unidentified. They also stressed there was zero forensic evidence, no fibers, no DNA, no hair linking Denny directly to Hannah's car or even her body itself, apart from the semen and the underwear found in the bag.
Which raises the question.
Exactly. How does a guy with a broken arm supposedly overpower Hannah, kill her, drag her body downstairs, put it in her car, drive it over a mile away, dump it, and then somehow get rid of the bag of clothes without leaving any other trace? It's a valid question about the practicalities. This led the defense to propose the planting theory. Could someone else, the real killer, or maybe even police wanting a quick resolution, have put that bag there? They questioned how the bag, which wasn't even tied shut, just kind of crinkled closed, could have stayed shut if it was supposedly thrown from a second-floor window.
Okay.
They also argued the sex might have been consensual. They pointed to the autopsy showing no semen inside Hannah's body and no physical trauma to her vaginal area. Though it's crucial to remember, lack of physical injury doesn't automatically mean consent wasn't violated.
Right, that's important.
And that white residue. The defense brought in their own chemist who argued it was a common substance found in lots of things, including car trunk liners, not just casts. They also highlighted leads they felt police ignored, like a nearby adult bookstore and some fast food wrappers in Hannah's car, suggesting maybe other suspects weren't pursued.
So the jury has all this thrown at them, conflicting evidence, really different stories. They had a tough decision. Was it aggravated murder, meaning murder during another felony like rape, which could mean the death penalty? Or was it just murder, still a life sentence potentially, but no execution? And initially they were really split, especially about that bag of clothes. Some jurors thought Denny kept it, maybe for some awful reason, and just chucked it out the window when the police showed up.
But others couldn't wrap their heads around it. Why keep something so incriminating for a whole week? Why wasn't it tied? Could it really stay closed if dropped like that? Some jurors actually started thinking maybe he was framed.
So the jury deliberates, and they eventually decide on the aggravated murder charge. They concluded there wasn't quite enough proof to say conclusively that Denny Ross raped Hannah that night, so that meant aggravated murder and the death penalty were off the table. Some jurors apparently still had doubts about his overall guilt at this point. They then went back to deliberate specifically on the murder charge itself. But then, literally minutes into starting that deliberation, something completely unexpected happens. A note gets passed to the judge. It turns out one of the jurors had been reading news articles about the trial.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and specifically, this juror read that Brad Urban, the ex-boyfriend, had passed that lie detector test we talked about earlier. And this outside information completely biased him. His thinking became, well, if Brad passed the test and is innocent, then Denny Ross must be guilty.
That is a massive problem legally. It means the jury is tainted, biased by information they weren't supposed to have. It results in a mistrial.
So the whole trial has to be redone.
Usually, yes. But here's the huge complication. Remember, the jury had already formally signed paperwork finding Denny Ross not guilty of the rape component when they ruled out aggravated murder. Because of the principle of double jeopardy, a fundamental legal right theory, you cannot be tried for the same crime twice once you've been found not guilty.
So they couldn't retry him for aggravated murder because the rape part was already decided.
Exactly. Since rape was the element that made it aggravated murder, and he'd been acquitted of that specific element by this jury's finding, they couldn't go back and try him for that again. It's a cornerstone of the legal system. But here, it had a really difficult outcome.
So what happened then? Because the jury was compromised and he couldn't be retried on the aggravated murder charge due to double jeopardy, Denny Ross was essentially let go. He wasn't found guilty of murder, but he wasn't found not guilty either. The trial just ended. He was put on probation for his prior drug charge. But that wasn't the end of Denny Ross's story with the law. Fast forward 4 years to 2004. Denny Ross was convicted and sentenced to 25 years in prison for raping a different woman in Akron.
And while that later conviction couldn't legally affect the outcome of Hannah's case because of double jeopardy, it certainly resonated with many people. It suggested a pattern of behavior that, had it been known or provable during the first trial, might have influenced the jury's view on the initial rape allegations concerning Hannah. It definitely cast his denials in Hannah's case in a different light for many observers.
Imagine the pain for Hannah's family, seeing him walk free initially and then this later conviction. It must have been incredibly difficult. But finally, years later, in September 2012, 13 years after Hannah was murdered, some kind of legal exception was made. A retrial specifically for Hannah Hill's murder was allowed to proceed. And this time, Denny Ross was found guilty. Guilty of murder, assault, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. He received a life sentence, but with eligibility for parole after 19 years. He'll be 67 then. So finally, after such a long and twisted path, Hannah Hill and her family got some measure of justice. The case was officially closed. It's just such a stark case, isn't it? A reminder of how long and painful the road to justice can be. And even with a conviction, that lack of a really strong forensic link directly between Denny and the car or Hannah's body itself apart from the semen and the underwear, it does leave some people wondering, And
Right. How exactly did he manage it all with so little direct trace evidence left behind at the final scene? It highlights the challenges, the complexities of these investigations. And maybe that leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. When you consider everything the police missteps at the start, the conflicting evidence, that bizarre mistrial, the long delay, what does this case really tell us about how hard it can be to find truth and justice in our legal system? Even when there's a conviction, sometimes the details, the how, the lingering questions, they remain a chilling puzzle.
We really hope this deep dive into Hannah Hill's story, as tragic as it is, has given you a clearer picture of this devastating case. We encourage you to think about the details, what stands out most to you. If you found this deep dive compelling, please do support the Horror Docs channel. You know the drill, hit that like button, share this with anyone else interested in true crime, and please subscribe if you haven't already for more stories like this. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time.